Hi, I'm Candace Hunter from the Practical Herbalist. Today we're going to talk a little bit about making herbal honeys. There are two types of herbal honeys that I use frequently and that are pretty darn easy to make and so yummy to take. The first of those is what we call an electuary. You can do an electuary in two styles. One of them is more of a pill style, the other one's more of a spread style. Sometimes electuaries can be called herbal spreads or honey spreads. Usually we don't talk about honey pills, but you could. Anyway, the big difference between the two is that herbal electuaries that are in spread style are just thinner and they spread like a jelly or a spread. And ones that are pills are usually a little bit drier and you can pick them up. They're not sticky. You can like form them into balls. So we use powdered herbs for those. And it's really it's a simple process. And, I'm just going to show it to you. So here you go.
Today I wanted to show you how I make electuaries. There's two types of electuaries. One's are the pill style and one are the spread style. And I'm going to show you the pill style today. So the first thing I do, So the first thing I do is I'll take a little bit of honey. I've got a dry spoon here. It takes a lot less honey to make the pill style than it does to make the spread style. So I start with a small amount. Set that aside. So that was not quite a tablespoon of honey. And then I've got my dude powder that I'm going to use. The recipe will be on either a link or on this with the video. And then we're just going to pour that on there. I'll set that aside. This is the part that takes a while, in part because you've got to really just mash it in. Use clean fingers. And you're going to be getting your hands dirty when you're making the pill style, for sure. So make sure your hands are good and clean before you get started. You can see how it's starting to incorporate, and you're starting to see the honey wetting all the herbs. That's part of what you're looking for. We may need to use probably we will need to use more powder because it's still sticking. You see how it's sticking to the bottom here? See how that's sticking? We don't want it to stick, so I'm going to put another tablespoon. So this is now 2 tablespoons of powder to approximately just under a tablespoon of honey. So it gives you kind of an idea. And okay, I'll have you guys come back in just a moment when I've gotten this more incorporated. All right, you can see how it's starting to not stick as much. It's kind of like doing a dough. What you're looking for is sort of that slightly doughy consistency. Now, I wanted to show you the difference. I've also we keep Dude Honey on the counter by the espresso machine so that Patrick can incorporate it into his coffees fairly regularly. So you'll see the texture there. It's very thick. It's starting to get doughy. This is a point where I would decide normally whether I want a little bit more. You might add a tiny bit more of powder, but today I'm not going to. I'm going to show you. This is what it looks like when it's spread style. So you'll notice how this has been well incorporated. You'll notice how it's smooth. Let's see if we can see that. See how it's smooth? And it might stand up a little bit now, but look at that. See how that drains down? Hope you can see that. So that's going to stand, and when I let it stand, it'll all slowly even itself out and get flat again. So I'm going to just set that aside. That's what it looks like when what you're looking for if you're doing a spread. So this would grow well The dude honey in a spread style goes well in coffee and that sort of thing, but it also works really well if you want to spread it on toast or spread it on other things. It can be added to like oatmeal and that sort of thing pretty effectively. When working with the pill style or the little, what I think of the pill style as being electuaries as opposed to an electuary. But when you're working with the pill style, it's not going to incorporate very well into things. It's just for straight up eating. Now, one of the things you can do, if you like, is get a little bit of extra powder, put that there, and then as you're forming your little balls, you can put them in the powder and then set each one aside. It's good to be consistent. There are techniques for being consistent, like rolling them into like wax paper in a roll. Chinese medicine has a lot of very specific and very handy techniques for making powders into pills, tea pills and similar. Okay, I'm gonna let you bring this back when I get these all filled or all made. All right, I'm about to roll my last one here. The powder that you put on the outside is just more of the, I used more of the same powder that I used to make it, so the dude honey powder. It works really well if you're doing, like, for instance, if you make ones that are cocoa and peanut, or not peanut, cocoa and peppermint powder. Works really well as a lovely, tasty digestive bitter, and then if you put a little bit of the chocolate peppermint powder on the outside, it gives you that extra bitter right on your tongue before you hit the sweetness. It's really good. And it's really good for your digestion. Really gets things moving properly. So I make these in small batches because, as you can see, they're kind of, it's a challenge to work with them. If I'm making them for like a party, I may make a bigger batch, like twice that size or 3 times that size for the group of people that I've got. I'm gonna let these stand for a few hours up to a day just out on the plate, and then because these are covered in powder, they will tend to hold their shape, and I can put them together in a container, and then I'll set them out so that they can be used.
There are a whole lot of different recipes you can use for making either type of electuary. As you saw, it's really pretty simple, straightforward, it doesn't take a lot of figuring, and the measurements often can be pretty much a lot of like by eye or by experience. It's similar to making a dough. You know, you can say use X amount of cups of flour and this much liquid, but once you're there making the dough, you might find you need a lot less liquid or a lot more flour or whatever. So that's how it is with herbal honeys, or for the electuary style herbal honeys. I like to make them when there are herbs that are not very tasty, like, you know, burdock or even grapefruit. Those work combined really well. I also like to use them for herbs that we should take daily, because taking herbs daily can be kind of a struggle, especially for some of us, like my little husband, Patrick. He doesn't like to take his herbs daily. But when I put them into a spread or into the little balls like the dude honey, he'll take them daily easily. It's not hard to get him to take them. So, you know, that's how I would use herbal electuaries. If you're looking for something that looks a lot more like honey, or you want to use fresh plants work really well in honey infusions. So that's the other one that I usually have in my household, is honey infusions. And honestly, it's really not that hard either. It's pretty much take fresh plants, put them in honey, be patient, like this.
Today we're going to start our first infused honey using fresh plant material. I picked these flowers earlier today, so we have a selection here. These ones are Monarda flowers, from Monarda fistulosa, And I did kind of wait till they were a little bit beyond. I could have done them when they were a little younger. Like this is a little bit better, but these will work. These ones are peppermint flowers. And I picked some peppermint leaves too, right there. This is anise hyssop right here. So we got those. And then we have a small number of purple cone flowers. These are a echinacea. This particular echinacea is a short variety. And then, so it's probably not angustifolia or lateriflora. Anyway, and then they've got elderberry flowers. We're gonna just use, I have a cup left, just over a cup of honey. It's approximately 290 milliliters or a cup of honey. So that's what we're gonna be using today. So I won't use all of these flowers. To make an infusion, we'll put in a honey infusion. We'll put in a few of the anise hyssop flowers. We'll put in a few of the peppermint flowers. Maybe 3 of those. And then we'll put in some of the monarda flowers. The monarda is going to give it a spicy flavor similar to like oregano and thyme. I'm going to put in a cone flower or two. Actually, I will put my 3rd one in. And then I'm going to put in some of my elder flowers. And I'm going to pinch off close to the end of the stems here, but I don't want to put the little individual flowers in if I can help it. It's going to be harder to strain out later. Otherwise, if I were doing tincture, I'd probably do them as just the little individuals. For the amount of cyanide that's in the stems, I'm not very worried about a lot of this being taken in. Okay. So that gives you an idea of about how much plant material we've got. I'm going to throw in a couple of stems of peppermint as well. My intention for this blend is that this honey will be used to sweeten infusions for when you're not feeling well, like cold and flu, a little bit of stomach upset, or you've concerns that you've been exposed to something. So you see how pretty that is? It's very fluffy. I'm not going to push it down right now. And you'll notice this is a quart jar, so that's about a liter. And is that right? A liter? Yeah, a liter. 2 pints, so a liter. 32 ounces is about a liter of size, volume. And I've got just over a cup of honey. So it comes out to about 290 milliliters. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, honey pours slowly and is rather thick, so we'll get this started. You can see we're just going to pour it in there and let the honey weigh down the plants. I'm going to try to get the honey to cover as much as possible so I don't have to stir later. I don't have to stir as much. Okay. To get all of that goodness in there. Then we're going to end up letting this honey stand for a couple of weeks. When you add fresh plants to honey to infuse it like this, the plants have water in them. So that means that the honey is being watered down. You can buy tools, a refractor, I think if I remember right, is the name of the tool that you can buy that will tell you what your percentage of water is in your honey. I don't have one of those, so as a rule, I typically, once I've got my honeys infused, store them in the refrigerator. All right. to get as much in there as possible. I'm going to let this stand, cover this, and each day I will use a can. I'll probably do use Don Combs has a tip for stirring honey infusions using a chopstick. So I will show you that when I get to straining this. But I think that's an excellent way to strain or to stir these. So there you go.
So you saw how easy it was to incorporate the plants. The hard part with herbal infusions, honestly, is stirring them. Dawn Combs recommends using a chopstick for stirring your herbal infusions, and she's right, it does. It's easy and it's easy to clean, and yeah. Plus you can taste a little bit of that chopstick every time you take it out, and before you clean it, you can try out, and you can see just by the flavor how you'll notice how your honey is infusing.
I'm going to show you how the two ways to stir the honey. First way is the one that I think is easiest, but it only works if you have a really tight lid. So make sure it's super tight. And the easy part about it is that all you do, you notice how the herbs like to be at the top of the honey. So tip it upside down. And hopefully my time-lapse video will have worked just fine, and I'll be able to show you what that looks like, and I'll tell you how long it takes.
All right, the honey's just about done here. That took about 30 minutes, and you'll notice most of the herbs are sitting very close to the top. When you're done, you can just leave this stand all day, and then tomorrow turn it back over the other way.
All right, so I wanted to show you the second way that I have been stirring honey. This is the one that I got from Dawn Combs. See how the herbs are at the top and the honey is fairly clear at the bottom. Dawn Combs suggests using a chopstick. I've got this nice metal one, which is very easy to clean. So I like to use that one. I'm going to open this up, and I've been using, you see that I've been using a sort of a folding almost sort of technique. The herbs that we've used for this one were all fresh, but they were all larger chunks rather than powderized. If these had been powdered or particularly fine, it would be really hard to stir them. So this technique does a pretty good job. It takes a little bit longer to get all the honey off the bottom and up to the top, but it's not too bad. I'm just going to give it a little stir because I already did the tipping it upside down and right side back up again technique, so it doesn't need a ton of stirring. I'm going to clean off my chopstick here. The thing I really like about this technique is that it gives you a chance to taste your honey. That is so good. This honey has been going for just over a week now, and already I can feel or taste the Monarda. The first day the Monarda was really strong, and then the mint started to come in. So you'll notice when you're infusing honey like this, particularly with multiple herbs, that as the days go by, the flavors change as each constituent and each flavor or each medicinal property is absorbed into the honey. So there you go. That's two fantastic ways to stir your infused honeys.
So once it gets up to a point where the flavor is what you're wanting, you're done. When you're done, that's when you have to be super patient. It isn't the patience of waiting, because herbal infusions, fresh plants infuse their flavors into honey and their medicinal properties into honey really, really fast, like days. But straining them takes a while, like this.
All right, today we are going to strain our infused honey. This is going to take quite a long while, so I'm going to do a time lapse of the process. It's really simple. I'm going to start off with a container that's easily much too large for my honey, so that way, once the honey's all coming through, it'll have plenty of space between the bottom of the strainer and the top of the honey level to drip. The other thing I'm going to do, I don't know if you can tell, this is a fairly coarse strainer. This is one of those Cook strainers that you get from the restaurant to supply shop that has a harsh, strong metal frame and then a thinner metal frame, or thinner the mesh inside. You could use pretty much any one. I chose this one today because it's big and strong, and I'm going to tip my jar upside down and leave it there a while. The honey is definitely ready to go. You can tell by the flavor of it. Honey doesn't change its color, in my experience, a great deal for most of the types of infusions that I've used or have done. If you do an infusion with something like turmeric, which has a lot of color to it, or elderberry, which has a lot of color to it, you're far more likely to get a lot of color in your finished honey that's different. But for this one, we used herbs that didn't have a great deal of strong coloration. They have their own pretty colors as flowers, but they're not strongly, like elderberry, strongly colored. All right. Now the hardest part with this is just being patient while you wait for it to strain through, because it's going to take a while. I'm going to be letting this sit for probably every bit of a half an hour, maybe even an hour. There we go. Got as much out of there as I can. We still have it dripping, although you can see here at the top that it's looking pretty dry here. I'm going to get my spatula. I can tell you that the herbs are still pretty strongly stuck together. It's kind of hard to move them about. We got there. My time-lapse video didn't work, but this gives you a pretty good idea of how slow it's going. I'm going to leave this and stand for a while longer. All right, we strained this honey out. As you can see, the texture of the herbs are very similar to what they were. They stick together a lot. There'll still be some residual honey in the bottom here that may not completely go out. We will accept that because I plan to set these herbs aside, and I will be using them to make a sweetened iced tea. This is not Georgia-style sweet tea, but it's what I think of as a sweet tea. So we'll set that aside. If I was being more thorough today, I might send this through a second straining because, as you can see, there are still some bits of plant material in there. Today, I'm not going to. I will probably strain this a second time tomorrow or the next day because I need to get other things done, and I'm running out of time to sit around and wait for my honey to strain. I am going to put it into the quart jar that I cleaned while I was waiting. The amount of plant material that's in there is so minimal, I don't know if I even will actually strain it. I imagine that if you were being very thorough, you would. I'm a little bit practical and a little bit lazy about it. And I know I'm going to use this honey up quickly enough. It shouldn't be a big issue. But the point of an infused honey is to not have plant material in the honey, but to definitely have the medicinal properties and the flavor and scent in the honey. So, there we go. And I will use what's left of the honey in this container, or in this bowl, to make my sweetened tea as well, so nothing goes to waste. I'll tell you, this tastes so good.
So you saw how we ended up with this plant material that still honestly had a bit of honey on it. It's all sticky and gooey. the two ways that I use that plant material, because I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm just too practical for that. The two ways I use that plant material when I'm done with it are, first, I might stick it right into my teapot and just make a pot of super sweet tea, which honestly is so good. And it's such a treat because you just finished having all this patience. And yeah. But the other way that I have often used them is to take that fresh plant material with the honey on it and then add it to my long infusion right at the very end of my long infusion, if I'm planning to make my long infusion into a syrup. Because the heat of the water at the very end, when I'm taking it off, when I've just taken it off the heat, but it hasn't thoroughly cooled down yet, it's still like body temperature or a little bit above, but not a lot above body temperature. That's when I'll add my plant material in. So if I've been good and practical about my long infusions and my herbal syrup making and planned it all right, I'll do that. More often it ends up in my pot, and then I have really good sweet tea, which I don't complain about because it's tasty. So I recommend that you take a look at Dawn Combs' book. I recommend that you give herbal honeys a try. I definitely recommend that you stick with honey that is as local as you can and as organic and raw, unprocessed as possible. Want to stick with, I say you want to stick with the local honey providers, your local bees, your local apiists, apiaries, apeists. You want to stick with them in part to provide support for them if they're doing their job right and they're not using a lot of chemicals and they're caring for their bees. The honey that they're offering you is going to be the most medicinal, the best honey possible. One thing about honey that I love is that it tends to synergize and enhance the herbs that you put into it. And if you're working with honey that was provided or created by bees who are loved and cared for, you're going to have a much better synergy. So I've noticed myself that the medicine and the mead and just, the taste of honey that's been from bees that were cared for and that were cared for organically typically is better. It tastes better. It feels better. It gives you more medicine for the amount that you're using. And then, organic is important in part because we really need to support the bees in our, not just in like your locality, but worldwide. We need to do a good job of supporting them because without them, we're going to lose an awful lot of pollinators, and that means a lot of our food supply. So in making your herbal honeys, realize this is also an ode to the bees and give thanks. It's not that hard. Herbal honeys taste so good.
This book is the one that I've been talking about off and on. The author is Dawn Combs, Sweet Remedies, Healing Herbal Honeys. She has a ton of good recipes, a lot of information on how to use herbal honeys, how to make herbal honeys in various different herbal preparations. She also does a wonderful job of explaining to us how honey is made and what the different types of honey and bee medicines are and how the bees use them, which I really appreciated. If you'd like to listen in and get to know Dawn a little bit before you buy her book, Real Herbalism Radio interviewed her. Shows 204 and 214 were the two shows that we had her on, talking about gardening for the bees and talking about making herbal honey medicines. All right, so Sweet Remedies, Healing Herbal Honeys by Dawn Combs.